we have in life is how can I transform myself? How can I change myself? I know so many things, but I wanted to really hit home. The Rebbe Rayatz was one of the most fascinating Rebbes of all times. He was controversial. He said folk tales. He wrote fantastical stories detailing the lives of the simple folk, of the Rebbes. People read these stories, they said, these stories aren't true. They're novels, they're fantasies, they're just not based on reality. And they said like never. He was like a Waberish tale writer. And that's how people used to make chayzik of the Rebbe Rayatz. But unfortunately, the greatest secrets lie in the simplest tales and the simplest stories. The entirety of the Baal Shem Tov is based on taking you to fantastical places. And taking you to fantasy worlds. You know what the Baal Shem Tov would do? If you ever read the tales of the Pinchas L'Karatzid, of the Talmid of Baal Shem, you see these crazy stories. Baal Shem Tov had this guy, he comes to him, he needed a tikkun. He's struggling in his life, he did something wrong, and then suddenly most of the stories go something to the effect that he said, come, let's go to the mikveh. And this guy goes down, he dunks in the mikveh, and then suddenly as he pokes his head up, he's in the middle of an ocean. And waves are about to drown him. He sees a log coming by and he grabs that log, and that log floats until he reaches safety, ends up on a beach collapsing, walks down a long winding path through a forest until he reaches this palace that's in the middle of a clearing, comes there, finds there a queen, gets married, raises children, and he's struggling for years, remembering where he came from, building a new life, confused what's going on. And then it's so clear that he ends up once going back swimming with his two daughters or two children who drown in that ocean. And as he sinks and he drowns, he's gasping for breath and he pokes his head up. It's 30 years later, and Baal Shem Tov is standing there looking on his watch. 3 minutes? Wow, it's been a long time. And you look at the story and you say, hello. Oder hat man genommen ein Mamin Samamun im Darten, oder it's nicht damals. What's really going on? But you see tons of these tales of the Baal Shem Tov. And then if you ever learned in Pesetzna, if you ever read Pesetzna meditations, he has you imagine these fantastical journeys in your mind. It's almost like a hypnotic journey that he's taking you on. But you realize that after you go into the fantasy world, when you come back to the Yabushu, to this world, you change forever. It's a different world. You're like, whoa. And then you go to the next place and you enter the world of Reb Nachman. Fantastical tales. You ever go into the Sepira Masas? Reb Nachman had the same backlash, that he made up folk tales, crazy stories that confuse. It took 200 years for people to start realizing that every tale that Reb Nachman said was describing the tale of your soul. But it has many layers of meanings. And you have to lose a certain level of consciousness in order to go into a different world where suddenly everything stems and it makes sense and it's perfectly describing you, showing you your place where you're stuck, and then allowing you to find a doorway, a pathway, that when you open that up, new worlds open up, that wow, new possibilities are here. And the princess was saved. I was saved. Even in the most impossible situations, through a derech min hatzad. Reb Nachman comes to the rescue. Only because he took you to a world of demyonis, of fantasies. So people make fun of him, but the joke's on them. Because when the people are living in boxes and in rules and regulations, they just can't escape. The Rebbe Rayatz was one of those Rebbes who had that secret key towards bringing you into a fantasy world, where he described emotions in great details, where if you come along, you go into this trance space. And if you go along in Lakita the Biram or in his stories, you can go for hours and get lost in a different world. When you come out of it, we used to sit with Shia Foigel and Hachel Menachem back in the days, like a group of 5-6 guys. We used to sit nights and learn Lakita the Biram with a bottle of mashka. There was no cell phones. We got lost in a story. We always had the same chavaya of like suddenly it's 4:30 a.m. for 6 hours, it seemed like minutes. Because he took us to a different... And when we came back down, there were certain truths about the world that stayed forever. You know why? Because God doesn't want to take you on the short road because it doesn't last. You know how God takes you out of Egypt? You know you can take the boy out of Williamsburg, but you can't take Williamsburg out of the boy. You can take the Jew out of exile, but how do you take exile out of the Jew? To take you on a long, winding, fantastical journey to places that your mind never explored. And when you go beyond to that space, and then suddenly new truths are here, there's no obstacles, there's nothing blocking you in a fantasy world of discovering a new truth. There's nothing that stands in the way between you and this new teaching. When you come back down to this world, something changed. The short way, the shortcut way doesn't work. You're going to go back into your box. That's the story of Bishalach, of how we take the Jew out of Egypt. We say, go on the long journey. I'm going to take you on a fantastical tale of splitting seas, of frogs exploding out of pain, of lice crawling, of Miriam playing with music, the tipim cholos, of people sinking like lead, of experiencing prophecy like nobody's ever seen before, and you get lost in the tale. But you have to allow yourself to go into the world of Bishalach, to allow the Parsha to transform you. Yosef Yitzchok, the holy, holy Rebbe Rayatz, who touched every Jew's soul. He kept thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Jews in Russia connected. He kept them vibrant and warm through communist Russia. You know how? Through his Hasidic tales that he invented. And he presented it as truth. You know why? Because there is no greater truth than keeping somebody warm and alive. That's the greatest truth in the world. The Rebbe Rayatz was a fascinating Rebbe. He managed to crack the code of how to take somebody stuck in the most impossible situation and keep them warm. You read about his Chassidim. They were in Siberia. They had nothing. The mamish had nothing. But they were kept alive through his tales, through his mystical tales. And for years, for 50, 60 years, there were people who were able to maintain their own because they lived in his fantasy world. And they came out, and the Lubavitcher Chassidim are in the millions today. I don't know the millions, but the effect is on millions of people. You know who kept that flame alive? The people who lived in the Chassidic tales. People who drink l'chaim. People, I want to tell you an unbelievable story I once heard. There was once a group of Chassidim who were sitting by Fabrengen. It was 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And the item was Gittung Getrinken, l'chaim was going wild. And one of them came up with this bright idea that they're going to go on a train out of Russia. And we got food and some Rebbe. How do you go out of Russia when you're sitting by a Fabrengen, by a table? So they stacked up all the chairs. And everybody sat on the chair, one in front from the next. And the guy in front was like, and it was wild. And they started traveling out of Russia. Now the stable people.
I forgot that a horse doesn't sound like a chicken.
And the people who were like still sane, they were like, no, where's she going? But you know what they said? I heard this from a few Chassidim who knew the names of the people. That whoever was on that train left Russia and made it out. Either to Israel or to America, and they joined the Chassidic train.
You didn't submit?
No, it was in Moscow somewhere. I don't know. Somewhere. You know why? Because they went into the Rebbe Rayatz's trick. They went into the game where you can imagine worlds that are impossible and eventually get there. And they all left Russia. But all the ones who were rationalists, and the ones who said, "Fish, this is..." Never. Maybe the Einiglich, you meet them sometimes outside of Viznitz. Covered Shabbos or something. That's like, wow. It's really sad. It's really sad to be stuck in a detailed checklist life where everything makes sense and it stems. Sometimes, in order to make life really work, you got to realize that it only works in worlds beyond. And that's the Baal Shem Tov. In order to make it work, realize that it has to work up there in order for it to even begin working down here. It's the holy Rebbe Rayatz we had today. Cham.